Kumlen Ablat Gemara, we're in Chalamoid, saying the Chalamoid, and today's daf is Nun Aleph Amid Aleph. We'll start from the bottom of the page of Nun Amid Beis. Basically, our Mishnah says we are up to the Nun Amid Beis in the very bottom of the page. Our Mishnah says that if somebody's Mekadosh, a woman and her daughter, or a woman and her sister at the same time, they are not Mekudesh. Okay, and then the Gemara tells us the Mishnah, and this is important to remember because this is what we're going to talk about. So that's called the ratio of the Mishnah. So neither of them are engaged to you. And then the Mishnah tells a story about a guy who had a basket and they had their figs in there, and there were 5 women there, and he says, "Here, you're all engaged to me with this basket, and there happen to be 2 sisters included there, and the person who is accepting on their behalf, they're all mekudesh except the 2 sisters." Okay. Says the so now the question is why? Why is it that both of them are non-mekudesh? One of them should be mekudesh. The Rambam Chama says he learns it from the pasuk that Isha la'chayis, shouldn't take a woman and a sister. He learns it literally. You cannot take both at the same time. And Rabba says the reason is not you don't have to say because that's pshat in the pasuk. In fact, that's not pshat in the pasuk, because if neither are engaged, then why would you get chorus? You're not living with a sister of your wife, because there's no wife there. So that's talking about you marry one of them and then you want to marry the second one. But the reason why you cannot marry both of them is because anyone that you cannot marry one after the other, you cannot marry at the same time. That's what Rabba's din is. So now, of course, Rabba is not going to go unchallenged. His favorite student is going to have something to say. Gufa, let's analyze it. Rabba laid down a rule. If you cannot do it one after another, no, if you marry one sister, you cannot marry the second sister afterwards. Then if you marry them both, neither of them are mekudesh to you. So Abaye comes along and says, Rebbe, I have a question for you. Interesting question. The din is you're supposed to give Meiser 10%. And then what happens is the rest of the crop is all right. It's no longer tevel. However, what happens? You set aside 20%. You want to be really frum. You actually messed up, because only 10% of that becomes Meiser, and the other 10% of that remains Chulin. But not only the other 10% remain Chulin, the 10% that's Chulin included in that 20%, you didn't take Meiser from that. Because whatever you took Meiser was for the other part, the 80%. So what happens is the 80% you're allowed to eat, the 20% that you have set aside, 10%, half of that is Meiser, half of that is Chulin, and you cannot eat that 20%. That's nobody said Meiser. Now the problem is like this, says Rabbi. What happens if you set aside 10% Meiser and then you decide to set another 10% Meiser? It doesn't work. The second 10% nothing happened, because once you gave Meiser, you just said a rule, kosher ain't. So if you set aside 20%, there should be no Meiser there. And because you say if you cannot do 10%, then another 10%, then if you did 20% in one go, nothing happened. So the 80% should be forbidden to eat, because the Meiser was never Meiser. That's okay. Says the Mishnah, says if you actually increase more than the 10%, if you give more than 10%, the 80% is all right. But the 20% set aside is messed up, because half of it is mice and half of it is chulin, and the chulin part is still tevel. Now, why do we say the 80% is all right? Name, let us say, if you would have said 10% as mice, and then 5 minutes later say, I'm going to put aside another 10% for Meiser. What happens to that second amount that you put away? Nothing. It's chulin. It doesn't turn into Meiser. So then I feel that means if you set aside 20%, none of that should have become Meiser. And if none of that became Meiser, then the 80% is still tevel. You cannot eat it because you did not set aside Meiser from it. You thought you set aside 20%. But nothing happened. According to you, Rabba, if you cannot do one after another, then if you do it one go, it would work. If you cannot marry one sister after another sister, then if you gave both of them Kiddushin, neither of them are engaged. Not we say one of them is engaged. Neither of them are engaged. So nothing should have been Meiser here. You follow? No, you can't. You can't. Once you gave Meiser on this thing here, so this is all Chulin, and it's not Tevel anymore, it's Chulin. So what do you mean you give me more Meiser? What is it? You can't give Meiser Chulin. You give Meiser from Tevel. You give Meiser from Tevel, and once you gave Meiser for this lot, it has a kedusha called Meiser. You have to give it to Levi. There's no kedusha or anything on the second lot. You want to give people gifts; it's very nice, but it's not called Meiser. Yeah, let's go. Let's go. He's taking mother. Why name a coach? Maybe it can be Amalei. So Rabbi answers back. Shiny Maisa. Maisa is different. You know why? Because the Isa lechatzai, Maisa, you have the right to take each piece of wheat and say half of it should be Maisa and half of it should be Chulin. So because you can take 20% and make the whole thing Maisa and have in mind, I only want half of that to be Maisa. So the same thing over here, that you can, so that's why by Maisa, it works. Even though you set aside 20%, you could make half. But when it comes to women, you can't say the two women, half of you and Mekudesh me. No such thing. It's one. The now what? If he would have said half of it should be Kodesh, it would have been Kodesh. You could set aside 20% and have in mind only half of it should be Kodesh. But you cannot engage both women and say, I want half of each of you to be Mekudesh to me. Okay, so he asked another question. What about Maisa Behema, the Leklechatzoyim? When you set aside the 10th animal that goes through your pen, there's no such thing as half. The For example, you set aside the 10th animal, and then you go to the 11th animal, you cannot set another Maisa Behema for that lot. 10th, and there's only one 10th animal. And yet, Rabba himself, so to say, Rabba, if two animals go out of the pen at the same time, the Koran Asiri, if you call them both 10, they're both Chal. What do you mean? What do you mean the Muravin? I'll say that one of them is Maisa and one of them is Shlamim. If you cannot do one after another, they shouldn't happen at the same time. You cannot give Maisa half an animal, and yet we see over here that if you set aside two for number 10, they both have some kind of. One of them is Maisa, it works out to be Maisa Behem. The other one is Shlamim. The answer shiny Maisa Behem. Maisa is very different. The Isa Batos. It's possible to have two number 10s. If you remember, we will learn that we learned Kara, and we learned before Kara Lucia City. You don't know how to count. The 10th animal is called 9. Well, City Chi. The 9th animal say equal 10, the 10th animal say equal 9, Ula Achados say the 11th equal 10, Shalashim Mikudashim. Over there, it's possible to have two come out as holy. Okay, so you might ask another question. How do you tell you carbon taida you're supposed to set aside? When you shech the animal of a carbon thanks offering, you're supposed to give 40 chalos with it. So carbon taida, the less of a tuss. If you made a mistake, you wanted these chalos to become kodesh. This pack is stack here, and then let's say the one color, and then you made another. I'm taking another one. Kodesh, it doesn't work. There's no room for mistakes by Toida. The lesson now is if you set aside 40 chalas and then you say, no, I want these other 40 chalas as well, it doesn't work because it's only when you shechted, you had 40. And yes, what's the problem? So you cannot do zechazeh. And yet, even we learned, Toida shenishchadash mein chalas, if you took a Toida and you did 80 chalas, Chizkiah, I'm a kachal abaydish, 40 out of 80 become Kodesh. Now, according to Chizkiah, Rabbi, you said it didn't. You wanted to work out with everybody. But Chizkiah says clearly if you made 80 and if you set aside 80 and 40 become Kodesh. But according to you, anything which you cannot do, nothing happens when you did it together. So none of them should be Kodesh. And Rabbi Yechon says, nothing happens. So your din follows Rabbi Yechon, but doesn't follow Chizkiah. Says didn't we learn? You're wrong, he said. Levi said, you misunderstood the whole argument. Everyone agrees. If he clearly said 40 out of the stack of 80 want to be Kodesh, then Kodesh. Everyone agrees. Why not? 40 out of 80. Look, I only want 40 to become Kodesh if I'm allowed to make in all 80 chal. I'm in such a generous mood. I want all 80 chal to become Kodesh. Like Kodesh, nothing happens because you cannot give 80. What do you mean when you have 80 chalos there? What did you mean by that? You happen to have 80 chalos there, but you didn't say anything. 40 you wanted to be Kodesh, the other 40 is a backup plan, just in case it comes. Tell me whatever it is. Or possible. He wants to give all 80, and that's no good. We have one question. Why does Rabbi try to answer like Rabbi? But one girl, the reason why a mother and a daughter is since he cannot marry one after another, they cannot happen together. Ask a better thing. The is Kiddushin. You should give a better reason. Kiddushin she'ein misudin lebinin. The Gemara will learn right now. Next line. Rabbi holds that if you marry two sisters, I say I want to marry one of you two sisters. You didn't specify which one. We don't know which one is the one who's Makadosh. He can. There's no Kiddushin at all. Why? Because each one, if it's not his wife, might be the sister of his wife, and he can't. And any woman that you cannot live with, there's no Kiddushin at all. So why don't you just say a mother and a daughter? If you marry them, if you try and Makadosh them both, the reason why you cannot, and is since you can't, not because one after another you cannot do together, it's because it's Kiddushin that not must be. You can't live with either one. Since you Makadosh both the mother and the daughter, you can't live with either one. The daughter of the mother, you Makadosh. The mother of the daughter, you Makadosh. Well, so you're right. But the daughter of the Rami Chama, he's talking to Rami Bar Chama. Should we go into that? Rava hold that even if he's only Kaddish one of the two, but forget about being Kaddish both the daughter or the mother, and we don't know which one. Neither of them, its Kiddushin is valid because it's the Kiddushin that you cannot turn it into a beer. So now we're going to talk about this subject. An argument by Rava, and these are from the few exceptions where we actually follow Abaya rather than Rava. Says the Gemara, up to two dots. Eat what we learned. Kiddushin she'ein mesudi l'bia. Kiddushin that you cannot ever consummate. And Taisus goes a bit further than Rashi. He doesn't like Rashi Pshat, because then in that case, how come for coin marriage or divorcee there's Kiddushin? You're not allowed to live together. Why is that considered Kiddushin at all? So Taisus learned the Pshat is, if the Kiddushin is what causes the problem, then there's no Kiddushin. In other words, a Kohen cannot marry a divorcee, not because he that's the law, even before he met her. But over here, if he marries two sisters, they're allowed to marry anybody they want. It's his Kiddushin that he got engaged to one of the sisters. He just doesn't know which one it is. His Kiddushin is what caused the problem. That's called Kiddushin she'ein nisar l'bia. Kiddushin that cannot turn into bia because of you, because of your Kiddushin. So the story is as follows. Abaye says, have a Kiddushin. Abaye says, of course he cannot live with, we don't know what girl is, he cannot live with either one of them, but the Kiddushin is, you need a get. They both need a get. And the Rava says, well, have a Kiddushin. You don't need to get at all. I want to know about Ahinas Agnes, a great man called Ahinas, and he explained to me, Kiddushin, tell the pasuk, if you marry a woman and get a woman engaged, we learned Yigach means with money, Ubala, and then you went ahead and you lived together. So we learn from our intimate Kiddushin Hamasud Lebi have a Kiddushin. If you can turn this engagement into a marriage, fine. And Kiddushin She'ein Masud Lebi a love Kiddushin. But if you cannot turn it into marriage, it's not Kiddushin. So now we learn. So now we're going to go through all these different proofs. In fact, almost all of them are supporting Abaya, except the one in our Mishnah. We're going to see now with this whole cup. There's a Reish in our Mishnah and a Sefer in our Mishnah. The Reish in our Mishnah said if you're Makadosh, a woman and her daughter or two sisters, it says in the Mishnah they're not Mekudesh. So it says they're not Mekudesh. When? If you did it ka'achas. The Mishnah says you gave them both Kiddushin at the same time. Sounds like from our Mishnah, but if you only gave one of them Kiddushin, you just don't know which one it is, then there is a Kiddushin. And you need to get. You're not allowed to live with them because each one might be not the wife or the sister of your wife, but you have to give, but a Kiddushin there is. That's what it seems. Proof, clear support to Abaya. But the next part of the Mishnah says that if he gave to 5 women and 2 of them happen to be sisters, the 2 sisters are not Mekudesh, but the 3 other women are Mekudesh. And l'chayda, we're going to see according to Abaya that says that we're going to have a problem with Abaya, because if according to Abaya there's Kiddushin, then they're all Mekudesh. Just you need to get. Yeah, you have to get whatever it is. We'll see. We'll see exactly how the problem is. According to Abaya, Kiddushin is chal, but you can't live with them, so you have to give them a get. According to Rava, there's no Kiddushin at all. Why? Because you can never consummate it. Second one is Mishnah should be doing when a daughter, Isha Chaysa, when a sister Ka'achas together, there's no Kiddushin. It seems from here about how Achas, he only gave Kiddushin to one of them. Let's say Isha Ubita. I'm Isha Chaysa, I'm a woman and a daughter, a woman and a sister. Mikudeshes, she is engaged. But my Kiddushin she'ein mesudin lebininu. You can never consummate it because each one might be the sister of the one that you got engaged to. To Yufta the Rava doesn't repudiate the Rava anymore. He uses very strong words. Instead of in Kasha, Kasli you were Tufta. Tufta is much stronger than Kasha. Rava will answer back. Okay, let's look at the next part of the Mishnah. Time made. Let's analyze the next part of the Mishnah. And the next part of the Mishnah suits me. And why is that? The next part of the Mishnah is Maisa b'chamish noshim. With 5 women, amongst them there were 2 sisters. The liket echad kol shem. One guy took a basket made of figs. The figs belonged to these women. V'shel shvi is happened to be the year Shemitah, which we'll discuss in the next few days. What's the relevance of that? But Amar, and he says to them, I want to engage all 5 women here with this basket. This basket is worth a lot of money. But the Chachamim said that, which you're quoting the Mishnah here, that the sisters are not engaged. It seems to me, if you read the Mishnah properly, only the 2 sisters there's no engagement, but the other 3 are. Now let's understand. What are we talking about? If he said, I want all of you to be engaged to me, 2 of them cannot and 3 of them can. Isn't that a case of kni at v'chamayru? If a person says, if a person wants to be, marking it to a child that's born into a what do you call it? Into a fetus, the din is that neither of them are kain. Why? Since the fetus The Uber cannot be kaina, nor can nor can the one that was born, because you put them together. It's like saying, I want you and that donkey to be kaina of that house. Since the donkey cannot be kaina of the house, you and the donkey, since the donkey cannot be kaina of the house, neither you can put them together. So if I said all 5 of you should be engaged to me, if 2 of them are not engaged, there should be no condition at all. So it can't be that pshat here. Then so you're gonna have to learn pshat mishas follow. Elalav, the Amal, this is what he says. Achaz mikem. I don't want to engage all 5 of you. Here, I'm giving the basket. I want one of you to be engaged to me, without spelling out which one. So 3 of them is no problem. Each one is a suffix. Maybe that's the ones engaged. But the sisters, they're not engaged. We're not engaged. Even though I only said one of you, because like me, since I cannot live with either sister, because each one might be the sister of the one who got engaged to me, therefore they're not mekudesh. Doesn't that only way he said you're going to shot in the sefer is that I said one of you, because I said all of you, then none of them should have been engaged to me, because it's like kni atvechamoid. I said all of you should be engaged to me, and since 2 of them can't be, none of them should have become engaged to me. So it must be when I said one of you be engaged to me, we don't know which one it is. So each one's a suffix mikudesh. But these 2 sisters are not even a suffix. Why not? I said one of the chayda. Why not? Because Rava says Kiddushin shalonim sulabiyah ain't a Kiddushin. There's no Kiddushin at all, because since I cannot live with either sister, because each one's a suffix, that might be her sister, might be the one that's engaged to me. I didn't spell out which one is engaged to me. Might be a sister. She's a sister of his wife. So what does he claim me? The only way to live Shana Mishnah is like me. And that is, you according to you, Abaya, even 2 sisters. If I said one of you, they should be engaged. Only thing is, they cannot live together, but should be engaged. And why did Mishnah say the 2 sisters are not engaged? And the only way Abaya can learn it is because he said, I want to marry all of you, and obviously he cannot marry the 2 sisters. And then the other 3 also shouldn't have been married, because it's like Kini Adrachamayt. I want all you to be kaina, and if some of them can't be, none of them are kaina. Follow?
Yeah, and the other 3, the only way he would be able to marry one of them is.
If he said no, we don't know. Yeah, the other three are all strangers. So there's no problem. In each one is a suffix. So either he ends up with, he decides which one he wants to marry, or he gives them all gittin. But they all need a get. Each one's a suffix.
As soon as any part of the union falls apart, the whole process falls apart.
If you put them all together, bunch together. So must be I didn't bunch together. I said achas mikem. If I said one of you, so then the only reason why neither sisters engage is because since they cannot marry either one, right to other. According to Rav, the B'Deisha doesn't make sense, and Labai Kasha Sefer. And according to Abai, the Sefer doesn't make sense. Each one is going to answer the Mishnah according to them. Abai is going to add a few words here. Abai Metadas Tamei and Rav Metadas Tamei. Each one will learn the Mishnah according to him. So Abai holds that even though 2 sisters, you cannot live with either of them, they're still engaged, you just have to either get. So this is how Abai learns. Abai Metadas Tamei. The first part of the Mishnah is clear, like him. Only if you marry them together, they're not engaged. If you only gave to one of them 2 sisters and you don't remember which one it is, so then they're engaged to you. They're both engaged, but you don't know which one, so therefore you have to give them both gifts. Right? Because even though you cannot consummate it, doesn't matter. According to Abaya, Kiddushin Shaloi is still valid Kiddushin. This is what Abai adds now. What happens if he says clearly, Haruya Labiyah Tiskadishli, I only want to marry the girl that I'm allowed to live with, not just to get engaged. Then neither of them are engaged to him. Because the fact is, Abai agrees, he cannot live with either one. Because each one, if you're not the one that I got engaged to, then you're the sister of the one I got engaged to. You cannot live with the sister of my wife. Okay. And then the Mishnah continues. So this is the introduction to the Sefer. Now what? He added the clause, only if I can consummate this, will I be interested in marrying you. Of 2 5 women, 2 sisters. He took a basket of Taini, and he said, the one that I'm allowed to live with is the one I want to be engaged with me. So the sisters are not mekudesh. Why? Because here you added the clause, only if I can turn it into a full marriage. So Bai is clear. So you just added that part. Now, how is Rava going to answer the beginning? The Mishnah, what's the problem with Rava in the beginning of the Mishnah? The end of the Mishnah is good according to Rava. The beginning of the Mishnah, it says clearly, if you marry a mother and a daughter together, as if to say, but if you only got engaged to one of them, no problem. There's no Kiddushin at all. No, sorry, it's a kasha Rava. It seems like only you marry the mother and daughter together do we say there's no Kiddushin. But if you only gave Kiddushin to one of them, you don't remember which one it is. There is Kiddushin. Kasha and Rava. Rava says if you can't live with them, there's no Kiddushin at all. So Rava says you misunderstood the Mishnah. Ka'achas doesn't mean you marry them together. Ka'achas means it has the legal status as if you did it together. Rava says, we're talking about you gave Kiddushin to one of the two sisters. You don't remember which one. You gave Kiddushin to the mother or the daughter. You don't remember which one. And the halacha says it's no different than if you gave Kiddushin to both. And what's it if you gave it to both? There's no Kiddushin. So Ka'achas is not what happens, not a Metzias, it's the legal status of this transaction. The Rabba answers as follows: you mekadosh one of them, the mother of the daughter. One of them, the mother, a woman and a sister. And you remember which one? Nasa legally has the same status as if you married a mother and a daughter or a woman and a sister. Not engaged. There's a story. The Chamesh Nashim and the Mishnah supports it. The story of 5 women, two sisters. I took a basket and said, all of you are engaged to me. And one of the 2 sisters are engaged to me. He said, clearly only one. I'm not married into both. Even though they said one, neither girl is Mekudesh because Kiddushin Shalanim Surulabiyah is no Kiddushin. Okay, that's it. So each one learns the Mishnah. Fine. Toshma coming here. Let's go. Now we're going to ask a whole bunch of questions on Rava. Toshma coming here. A Mekadosh be this time. It says in the Mishnah, if somebody's Mekadosh's daughter, without spelling out, Ein habayis b'chlal. The girls over 12 and a half are not included because the father has no jurisdiction over his daughters once they're 12 and a half years old. It seems b'haktanas b'chlal, but his daughters that were under 12 and a half are included. The only thing is we don't know which one that is. Now the sisters. Rava says that if you're engaged to more than one sister, then there's no Kiddushin at all. But it seems to me clear to me that the Ktanas are engaged. But my Kiddushin shouldn't be, the question of Rava, it seems like let's say had three, four daughters under 12 and a half years old. They're engaged, or Suffolk, which one it is. And they need Kitten. Why? There's only one adult girl and one minor. And therefore, it's only one minor, no problem. So the Gemara says clearly in plural, by grace. My not talking about you have a lot of it. Just saying generally, if an adult girl's out there in the world, but you only have one daughter. What's the chiddush then? Everyone knows over 12 and a half you have no jurisdiction. Everyone knows that under 12 and a half you do, and you have only one daughter. Of course she's engaged. As beating the sati l'isha. In the Shavisa Shliach, it's talking about that the daughter was 12 and a half, said to her father, look, I need a shidduch. If you see a nice guy, please get engaged. So the question now is, then he found a nice bocher and he got engaged, but he didn't say to which daughter. Which daughter did he do it for? The one that's over 12 and a half who asked him a favor, or the one under 12 and a half that is totally in his control? Because she asked him, she appointed him as a shliach. No, for the younger daughter. Says the Gemara, why? It's interesting. He gets money. If his older daughter, Nebuch, she's really over 12 and a half, and she's an old maid in those days, a spinster already. Money talks. Very hard to understand this whole concept. The Mishnah includes all cases. Maybe the daughter said, if you find me a shidduch, you keep the Kiddushin, I just want to get married. Says the Gemara, he probably meant the younger daughter. Why? We learned before already, that there's a mitzvah for a father, and a mother as well, we have as well, to marry off their children. So therefore, it's not just the money, it's the mitzvah. And therefore, he'd rather discharge his mitzvah. If there's only one bacher there, he'd rather do it for his daughters under 12 and a half than for the daughters over 12 and a half. It's not his mitzvah anymore. That's what seems to be here, which is interesting. It's more like Abbas Yisrael than Al Chinuch. Which is interesting, because we had the Gemara before, don't marry your daughter off in the Ketana, because it's not Abbas Yisrael. Here it's saying the only time you have a mitzvah is when she's a Ketana. Unless it's that period of Naira, that's 6 months. That's the whole window of the mitzvah where it is no problem, Abbas Yisrael, she's mature already, and still under your jurisdiction. Interesting point. Toshma coming here. We had it. You take your children and marry them off. Yeah. We had it. Thinking about it further. A guy married 2 women. Each one came with a whole lot of daughters. So he, in his family, had a whole bunch of girls. But why he did this? He messed things up. I don't know. He's a klutz. This is what happened. He said, "Kidashti is biti hagedayla." He said, I remember I met this guy at Yerid, maybe we're a little bit happy there, and I said to him, my older daughter, the older daughter is engaged to your son. Now, who's the older daughter? Of which group? And what older means? Look at this. Any day, I don't remember. Im Gedolah Shebegdolas is the oldest in the first group. Im Gedolah Shebegtanas is the oldest in the second group. Im Tana Shebegdolah is the youngest in the first group, which is older than the oldest of the second group. So she's also an older girl. We don't know. So what we do know is Kula Nasudas Chutz Kamatanas. They're all forbidden except the youngest of the youngest. That's definitely not called a Gedolah. What's the problem? They're all sisters. Each group has sisters. And according to the Rava, since we don't know which one it is, there's no condition at all. Especially the oldest group. The youngest group, you say, there's only two girls. And it's definitely not the Ketana, so maybe the older one. But the older group, there's two girls, and each one's a suffix. That's the one that's included. So neither should be Mekudesh. So Rabbi answers, so according to Rabbi L'Chayda, if you cannot consummate the marriage, the Kiddushin, there's no Kiddushin at all. So what's the suffix? No, at the time, he was lucid, and he knew exactly who it was. So there's no suffix. The problem is now he came home, he can't remember what he made up. I mean, such a hefkerus. It's like, you read these stories how parents treated their kids.
By the lens of today's standards, it looks strange to us.
Well, you marry your daughter if you have no idea which daughter it was.
How much of them?
They cannot be approved to the Tony. It says, any day, I don't know. But like Tony, and you do, it's not known. Any day means now, presently, I don't know. At the time, I know. Shmamina. So what's the Kiddush? So what's the Kiddush in this whole din over here? He knew it's an older one. He doesn't remember. So I need a Mishnah. La Fukim Rabbi Yasi. No, Rabbi Yasi actually argues. He holds it's definitely the oldest daughter. Nobody's going to say such a cryptic thing, so ambiguous. My older daughter, and then it's a total mess up. It probably was the oldest. If he doesn't specify a name, it must have been the oldest daughter, the B'chayra. Nobody goes into puts such a important, such a seminal event in a person's life, and it's so cryptic about it. Commercial, the Machin are speaking. I said, no, that's how people are. Toshma coming here. This no is a suffix. He doesn't remember which one because Tak is a suffix. Saying about Toshma coming here. Somebody gets engaged to one or two sisters. Any day he's a kiddush, doesn't remember which one he's Mekadesh. Noise and get Lazu. If he's Mekadesh, one of two sisters. Right, Rachel and Leah, he's Mekadesh one of them, and he doesn't know which one he gave Kiddushin to. It says clearly he gives a get to both of them. What does that prove? Exactly like Abaya. Even though he cannot live with either one, because each one might be the sister of the one he got engaged to, but it still needs a get. Not like Rabbi who says that if he cannot turn it into a full marriage, there's no Kiddushin at all. Clearly, you need a get. Saying about the same answer. We're talking about a case where he knew at the time, and then suddenly they look very similar, these two sisters, and he can't remember who's what. They can I prove it to you. Tony, they can approve the Tony ain't the idea. He said, in fact, I just met somebody in my house, and they told me that they had twins, and they look so similar that their whole life they had to put something on the hand, different color watch or different color thing. This one is blue, this is red. Always did something so they should remember who his parents. Yeah, so exactly. So maybe something over here. They can prove the Tony. It says Einu Yodea. And that it says again, Einu Yodea. I don't know. For the Tony, Einu is not known. In other words, he knew at the time, but he forgot. Here now we're going to go into the story of Yavam. If you remember by a Yavam, the thing is that you're not allowed to marry the sister of the let's say Reuben passed away, left behind a woman Leah. Shimon, who's now a Yavam, a potential partner, is not allowed to marry Leah's sister Rachel, because that's called Achois Shkukasim. If he gave Chalitza to let's say to Leah, Reuben's wife, he cannot marry Rachel because Achois Chalutzase. But his brother could marry if let's say Shimon gave a Chalitza to Reuben's wife, then Levi is allowed to marry because it's not Achois Chalutzase, it's the Chalutza of his brother. But Achois Kukase, nobody can marry because it's Zok to everybody. Okay, bear that in mind. So no, it's not. But then you have this one has to marry. Then okay, think about it. What's the chiddush then? What's the chiddush if he knew at the time and now it's a song? Okay, you got to give a get. Obviously, if you get no safe each the chiddush is all about Yavam, and that's as follows. Mace, what happens that this person who married one of his sisters died? V'layach, he has a brother. Reuben has a brother Shimon. And there's two women there. We're not sure which is the woman which is Reuben's wife. So Echad Achacha has one brother. It's Chaylis Stein. Since he doesn't know which is the wife of Reuven, he has to give Chalitza to both of them. Haylish Naim, let's say he had two. They had two brothers. Had Shimon and Levi. About 6 lines about it. He had two brothers, Shimon and Levi. Echad Chaylis ve'echad Meyabim. So he gives one of them, the first person, so Shimon, let's say, will give Chalitza to one of the sisters, and then the other one can be Meyabim, the other one, because Manushich. If the second sister is really Reuven's wife, no, she's doing a mitzvah yibum. And if the second sister is the sister of Reuven's wife, so Reuven's wife already received chalitza. So the other brother is allowed to marry the sister of the chalutza of the first one. In Kadmu, the contract is not the other, but let's say when they both married the sisters, there's the whole thing is Rabban anyway. Okay. Davke michlet, the Kiddush is Davke michlet v'hada yibum. What you're allowed to do is, let's say two brothers, Shimon and Levi. Shimon has to do chalitza first, and then Levi can do the yibum. But you cannot do yibum first, marry one of them, because why? If you're going to marry one of them, it turns out to be that she's not really Reuven's wife. She's a sister of Reuven's wife. You marry the sister of the one that you're supposed to marry. That's called achois zukukasa, and that you're not allowed to do. Talk about achois zukukasa, and that you're not allowed to do. That's the Kiddushin. That the sequence has to be chalitza and then yibum. Is two separate men, two strangers, marry two sisters. They both gave Kiddushin. They don't remember which sister the thing. So then each one has to give two gittin, right? Two strangers, each one has to give two gittin. What happens again? Why they give two gittin according to Rabbi? Since you each one married two sisters, gave Kiddushin to one of two sisters, you can't live with either one. It should be no Kiddushin. So yeah, it's the same thing. You knew at the time, and then you both forgot. They can now approve it. On any day, I don't know. Doesn't any do it? It was no. What's the Kiddush in this one? Safe. Kiddush is following. That what? Mess. Both of them died. These two people who married these two, who got engaged, one of these two sisters, both of them died, and each one happens to have a brother. They both have a brother. Now each brother doesn't know which of these two sisters is my brother's wife, so he has to give chalitza to both. Is that chalitza? What happened is the same idea as we had before. One of these men had one brother, and one of these men had two brothers. So the one brother gives chalitza to both because you don't know which is the one his brother's wife. And the other one has two brothers. One guy can give chalitza, the echad meyabim, and the other guy then can marry because manushich. If that's really my brother's wife, I'm marrying her. If that's not my brother's wife, that's the sister of my brother's wife. Then what's the problem? Then it's the sister of a chalutza, no problem. In Kadlu, the country, they got had married, we're not going to penalize them. All things are born anyway. Davke michlet, but what need the chalitza first and then yibum. But if the one of the two brothers marries one of them, you're not allowed to marry one of the first. Why? Because maybe that why not? Because maybe that girl is not the one who was married to your brother, and therefore that girl really was married to the other guy. So she has to wait to be chalitza or even something from her husband's brother. So it's allowed for her to marry anybody outside the family because remember the two strangers. This brother, you are not the brother of that other guy, and therefore it could be she has to wait for the other guy's brother to marry or something. And if you're going to marry a chalitza, you're marrying a woman that should also the isur of Yivam L'Shuk. You could probably be Yivam L'Shuk because when we're talking about a case with two strangers there. This guy had 5 sons, 5 daughters. This is terrible. One of your sisters, now this, he can't give me stories that one of your sons clearly said one and one. Every one of them needs 5 gittin. You don't know which one. Made from the 5 sons. Each girl needs to receive 5 gittin from each of 5 boys.
These girls never had grushas. Now they're ruled out from.
Yeah, they were part for the suffering. Yeah. Mace Echemen. What happened when the brothers died? Then and now one of them might be needs to marry. Needs 4 gittin and needs 1 chalitza. All you need is 1 chalitza from, and that's enough. So the kasha rather clearly here that you were saying he cannot live with any of the girls because each one might be the sister of the one that's married, and yet they all need Kiddushin. And Rabbi says clearly that if you cannot turn it into a marriage, there's no Kiddushin. And here clearly you can't. He said one of my sons and one of your daughters didn't specify anything, and none of the sons can marry any of the daughters because how do you know that's the girl that was engaged? That's the sister of the girl that's engaged. Is there some sort of order? We'll see in a minute. Here clearly it says one of your daughters, one of my sons. It clearly did not specify which one. Don't tell me I say he knew which one they forgot. Tiyufta did over Tiyufta. Finally, we refuted him. These are the six things, and the kuf is Kiddushin Shalom. Fascinating traces. I'll just tell you the traces because it always bothered me. Rabbeinu Tam Paskin, what happened was a guy came along and he said, one of my daughters is engaged to your son. He said the son of Rabbi Ishi, I'm not sure what Rabbi Ishi Levi is, but one of my daughters is engaged to your son. So Rabbeinu Tam says it's the oldest daughter that's engaged. Why? Because Lavan said, you can't do that to marry a younger daughter before an older daughter. In fact, the meaning of Elam is that if a younger daughter gets married, or something, you have to have Rishus. Very difficult. I never understood this. Yaakov wanted to marry Rachel. No, he held up the halacha. You're allowed to marry a younger daughter. Lavan says, no, we don't do this way. We have to marry the older one. The halacha is like Lavan against Yaakov. Why would we pass it? Why would a Tam pass like Lavan against Yaakov? And then it says he changed his mind for the simple reason all these Gemaras, like this case right here. If one of your sons or your daughters, then obviously it should be the older daughter. Because like Yasa came and came. And so what's shot that Rabbeinu Tam took Lavan's word, the Yazgim came and made it a rule, universal rule for everybody against Yaakov. I would love someone to explain to me what's shot. It's the top places on the page with Beis Amud Aleph. Anyway, have a good night, everybody. We'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem.